Thank you for joining Preservation Dayton today and interviewing Monica Snow. She first moved to the Oregon District in the late 70s, back when the neighborhood was known as Filth and Wine, and there were still talks of razing the entire neighborhood for redevelopment efforts. Because of strong preservationists like her, not only the Oregon District was saved, but many other buildings and neighborhoods avoided the wrecking ball. I hope you enjoy our conversation today as she talks about all of her preservation efforts through the years and how volunteering can make such a huge impact for everyone in the community. Thank you. Well, thank you, Monica, for doing this interview with us today. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
So I know that you did not originally grow up in Dayton and weren't from Dayton. So what was it, where did you grow up, and what was it like growing up? I've heard you tell me a couple stories about no indoor plumbing, kind of stuff like that. Yeah. So where did you grow up at?
So I grew up in rural Nebraska. My ancestors were actually homesteaders. During the Union Pacific Railroad, they had to have a way to recuperate their investment for the transcontinental railroad. So they did a lot of recruiting in Eastern Europe. So my county was literally part of the Homestead Act. So two sides of my family actually came for the free land. I was fortunate enough to have two great-grandmothers that I knew quite well. One of my great-grandmothers, literally, Josephine was her name, lived in a sod hut. And she lived until I was 22 years old, and my other grandmother came from the Slovakia portion of Czechoslovakia, and she lived till I was about 12. So I was very close to heritage and family, and one of my 4-H speeches was save our rural schools. We were sort of the last of the family farms where it's a big thing now for regenerative agriculture, but that's how my dad farmed. He had 360 acres, and we had dairy cattle, we milked cows by hand, we had beef cattle, we had hogs, we had sheep, we had kids, we had cats, we had dogs. So very much tied into that sort of heritage. And as the farm population decreased and farms started getting bigger, they started closing our one-room country schoolhouses. So that was the inspiration for my 4-H speech, save our rural schools. So I guess I've always been a preservationist. So.
Oh, great. Well, so that was kind of my next question is, like, what are some influences that really sparked your interest in historic preservation?
Well, part of it was, the schools closing. And then I guess the other real seminal event was the summer before my senior year in college. Two of my friends and I hitchhiked through Europe, and just seeing the architecture and even after the bombing of World War II, how the European cities and capitals were rebuilt. So that was, and I took an art history class as an undergrad at the University of Nebraska, and just, appreciating architecture, art, those were probably the two biggest things. And then came back to Lincoln to finish my senior year at the University of Nebraska, and kept wondering, why are we tearing down everything? Following that, my ex-husband went to pilot school in Columbus, Mississippi right after we graduated, and that town was never burned during the Civil War, so there was amazing architecture there. The first night we ended up in Dayton, Ohio. He was stationed at Wright Pat. We came down 444, 675 wasn't built yet, and we saw the old courthouse. And we thought, oh my God, this is really cool. And we happened to stumble upon the Oregon District that evening after dinner. So those were kind of the big things, I guess, that made me passionate about historic preservation and architecture.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about from first finding the Oregon District to then seeing it evolve over the, what, 4 or 5 decades that you've been living there?
Yeah, almost, yeah, it's hard to believe. So there is a restaurant where Wiley's Comedy Club is. Dave Chappelle owns that building now. We keep waiting to see what Dave's going to do. But that was a German restaurant at the time called Grammer's, and somehow we just found it. The waiter said, hey, this is an up-and-coming neighborhood. You should walk around after dinner. And we did, and we met 2 of the real inspirations and risk takers, Bill and Joanne Hinkle. At the time, I still call them the patron saint of Oregon District, and that was in '78. The neighborhood was going to be torn down in '73, '74. The Hinkles, a person named Martin Kelly, who worked for the water department and was a very revered Dayton historian. His family home is the last brick home right on Main Street as you go up the hill to Miami Valley Hospital. It's still in his family. An Oakwood realtor, and then the director of the Dayton Art Institute at the time, and Jean and Jim, I always get her husband's name, Jean and Jim Woodall, the Woodalls who lived in Oakwood. They were kind of the core group that convinced the city not to level the Oregon District. It was going to be more high-rises like Park Manor and Dayton Tower. And the Woodalls funded a firm out of Chicago to kind of come up with an alternative plan. It was called the Burns-Jackson Plan. We still have that in the archives at Wright State. And the concept was to take down some of the worst, terrible houses, make it a walkable artist community, have maybe grass pavers instead of paving. That stimulated enough interest that people started buying the houses. So there was a big myth that, oh, there were dollar houses. There never were. Winters Bank did, which was the predecessor of Chase, Winters Bank did have a low interest home rehabilitation loan program. But those visionary leaders sparked enough interest that people started buying properties and investing in properties. So by the time we got there in '78, we were not the real risk takers. The neighborhood was still half empty. Many people had moved and sold their properties because they thought it was going to be demoed, just like the Haymarket, where Dayton Towers is standing now, is the old Haymarket area. That was leveled first. But there were still a lot of the original homeowners who came up from Kentucky and Tennessee. They were holding on to their houses. They didn't want to give them up. And so by the time we got there, it was still about half empty. We looked at houses in every other community from Arcanum to Beaver Creek to Oakwood. But we had met the Hinkles that night and just really clicked with them and decided to make an offer on 68 Green Street, which had been a 14-unit rooming house.
Oh, wow.
And that happened to a lot of houses, you know, the bigger houses because of the housing shortage during the war. 2 investors, Tom Tornator and Jack Marr, had taken it from a 14-unit rooming house into a 3-unit apartment building. And we bought it and lived on the first floor and then proceeded to renovate the renovation, including scraping paint off all 4 sides with a 40-foot extension ladder and propane torches, and redoing all the windows, which had never been redone, and then spending lots and lots of money on that house over the years to renovate it twice.
Yeah.
It's now a 2-unit instead of a 3. I brought it back to a 2-unit.
Yeah, some of these renovations that they do on these properties, you get them and yeah, like you said, you need to renovate the renovations.
Yeah, so. right. So
what has it been like, or what are your feelings about how you've seen it change? You know, it's come a long way. It's probably one of the most sought after neighborhoods in the entire city. And so what has that been like for you?
I think if anyone ever has a chance, we'll probably show it one more time. Oregon Stories, it's a documentary that John Bogner did with support from the Montgomery County Arts and Cultural Grant and neighborhood matching grants. I think that the thing about any neighborhood, when you're trying to revitalize it, everybody is part of a very strong sense of community, and as one of the Tim and Sharon Patterson, another, they're in their 80s now. They did the Balsley Mansion. I think Tim or Joanne Hinkle says in the documentary, the minute we knew somebody moved in, we were there with, a 6-pack of beer welcoming them, and because we wanted to support another, property owner, another homeowner. So that instant sort of sense of cohesiveness. There was also a lot of the people who moved there were empty nesters. So a lot of our closest friends were my parents' age. So a lot of cross-generational, different economic backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, different, just a real sense of we're a community and we're in this together. We still have that. We're still a very close-knit neighborhood. We maintain our park. We always have for years. All of our street lights were actually done originally. Phil Robertson, who again was one of the other original risk takers, he did his first house right when you walk out of Jay's front door. He's the second house down. Phil literally helped install all the street lights, which homeowners pay for, so we don't have the lighting assessment that the rest of the city does. Phil literally hand dug the trenches from the light poles and the tree lawns to connect to the houses. So believe it or not, we still have 4 more lights of the original lighting plan that we have raised enough money for, and we're getting those put in. We have a very active lighting committee that maintains all of them. And then our park, originally, there's old pictures of it. It was basically nothing but cement, and it's still a city-owned park. The neighborhood got all of the cement taken up. Literally, neighborhood volunteers. Our gazebo is our iconic, along with the lion's head, our iconic kind of branding. That gazebo, the city poured the pillars, but the whole roof and all the decorative trim was completed by 3 residents who are now deceased, but we maintained the whole neighborhood, or the whole park. So about 5 years ago, we started transitioning to native plants, and we have a real avid park committee. We have the longest continuous only 4th of July parade in the city of Dayton. Everybody's welcome. The only rule is no spectators. And we have more children now than we ever have. So the park is a real active center for our community. And then we do socials and block parties. And so that sense of cohesiveness is there. COVID, I think, set us back a little bit. Just people were not coming out. We're trying to get more social activities and to get more people involved. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard in every neighborhood.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's great. I know you had mentioned more kids. I know that's something you had mentioned to me before.
Yeah.
So I know that all these historic districts will love families and just because I feel like it's easier probably for the empty nesters or younger single people.
Yeah.
But like that's something that I feel like really will bring a community all together is these families.
Yeah, we have a reading challenge. The kids did that last summer, and a kids committee, and they help in the park, and it's real fun.
Yeah, so you have been very involved in Preservation Dayton, especially over the last 10 years or so. How did you get involved with Preservation Dayton?
Well, Joanne Hinkle, the person I keep speaking about, who is 96 and lives in Grand Rapids, I see her every summer. Joanne Hinkle, a person named Doug Artkamp in South Park, Todd Carver, who now lives in the Oregon District, who was one of the earlier pioneers up in St. Anne's. And then, I always forget his name, but an individual in McPherson. They formed what was called the, I'm going to forget the name of it, it's on our website, the Coalition of Historic Neighborhoods, which then evolved into Preservation Dayton. So I always knew about it. Joanne, was very active in it, and I've been a member for a long, long time. As you know, Evan, the organization was kind of waning, and I guess around 2019, we decided to give it one more push, and we put some things out on social media, and young, dynamic people, and old-timers like me showed up, and now you're leading the way, and it's...
Yeah, that's how I found out about it. I had no idea what Preservation Dayton was, and then I saw that random post. I said, I'll go to this meeting. I didn't know that I'd be doing all this. It was like, it was a big step. I mean, it's amazing how far we've come in just that.
And thanks to you and many, our whole board is really strong, and I think it's because we are a coalition. Each of the historic neighborhoods appoint their own trustee, their own representative, and then we can have one fewer at-large trustees that we elect. So we're very broad-based, and I think that there's a lot of different perspectives. And yet commonality of caring about what makes our built environment, what makes Dayton unique, what makes our culture unique. And once that's gone, once a building is gone, it sounds weird, it's very hard to recall those stories. The physical manifestation of the people who worked and had businesses and went to church and is a reminder of where we've come from, and so we can learn from the past and not make some of the same silly mistakes we've made as human beings before. So
what other, I know you do a lot with Preservation Dayton, I know you're on the Allwood board. Do you want to just talk about some of your other boards that you're on and what you do for them?
And well, in fact, here I'll put a plug in for Allwood. This home, Evan's home where we're at, was John All's brother's home. Do I have that right?
His brother or his nephew?
Or his nephew.
I think. I always forget. I just have to reread it. But yeah, they did. I'm sure the Alls were here.
Yeah, probably. So if you haven't been to Allwood, I encourage everybody to go to Allwood. It's an amazing nature center. John and Marie All donated their land both to the Audubon, National Audubon Society, as well as major endowments to the Dayton Foundation. And the Friends of Allwood are the support and nonprofit group that supports Allwood. It's very unique. Marie was a leader in nature education and conservancy in the Midwest. And so that's kind of fits with my preservation approach. I'm a huge environmentalist, having grown up on the last of the family farms. I remember my two grandfathers saying, we're going to kill this land with all this fertilizer stuff. And again, you and I share this when we do our presentations. One of the biggest sources of carbon emissions are new construction. So for every building we save, we're keeping the embodied carbon there. So it was just a natural fit. I got to personally know Marie All. Her niece, Mary Prue, lived in the Oregon district. And so Mary would take us up for walks with Aunt Marie. That was, we'd go up 49 long before any, Myers or any of that was, or 48, whichever way we get up there, but before any of the suburban sprawl. And so she was a real inspiration to me, and it's a very unique area. So many people in the local area don't know about it, but their home is obviously historic as well. So.
Yeah, what about any, don't you do something for the city? Are you on the housing city?
Yeah, the city, about 3 years ago, the city put together with a lot of community input a strategic housing plan. We meet quarterly. We're sort of more of an advisory group. Neighborhood reps are. I'm supposed to be writing a report, my subcommittee, which we haven't had time to do, but so far the city hasn't fired me in my unpaid volunteer job. But it's not only some representatives from the community, but a very diverse group of County Corps is represented, the Land Bank, Amy Regal, who's the statewide leader of the Coalition for the Homeless, so several St. Mary's Development Corporation, so it's the nonprofit housing sector as well as the community representatives. So basically we're going through the strategic plan. It will be the city managers asked for an update, and one of the key committees is working to form a housing trust fund, which would be a source of gap financing, in addition, another source of financing for more housing in the city.
So talk a little bit about your career, and then how did your career, did it influence some of the boards you're on, some of the passions that you have. How did that kind of shape?
So I started out as a journalism major at the University of Nebraska. I had a journalism scholarship. I got my first C in my 1 credit writing lab, so I quickly switched to English. I couldn't stand getting a C. So I was a high school English teacher for a number of years. My ex-husband got to go back to grad school at the University of Michigan at the end of the Vietnam War, so I got a master's degree in English and then a master's degree in library and information science. I have a master's degree in the Dewey Decimal System. So my first job here was at the medical library at Wright State University, and then I had a manager who encouraged me to get an MBA. Got recruited in the early days of Me Data Central and LexisNexis, and then went on to Reynolds and Reynolds, and then ended my career doing marketing and recruiting back at Wright State. So I guess, I don't know, I'm a big fan of the liberal arts, and I guess my most valuable program was English, because you've got to be analytical, you've got to be able to come up with analogies and comparisons and solve problems. And I probably go down in too many rabbit holes because I'm also a great researcher, being a librarian. So, as you know from my way detailed emails, right?
and back when you would say how many trees you killed with all the handouts.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right.
So just back to the Oregon District a little bit. What is your favorite thing about living there? What do you enjoy most living there?
It's just the neighbors. Our houses are so close to each other. You have to get along and you have to know each other. We have had a lot of turnover lately, and I keep meaning to have a little gathering on our block. We've got 3 new homeowners on our block alone, but life happens, and I've had some other challenges with some health issues in my family. But it's just getting to know everybody, and everybody cares so much. And I think you have to be a special person to want to come to an urban neighborhood and be open to meeting different people. And our garden tour, we had tons of volunteers for that. Again, I go back to the park, which is kind of our focal point. All of that maintenance is done by volunteers. We don't, we pay to hire somebody to mow the grass, but the city gives us enough funding to mow the grass. But when the playground equipment was defunct a couple years ago, we, in addition to having the city replace the playground equipment, we did some other things for garbage cans and things, fundraising of our own. So it's just the friendliness and openness. And somebody posted on our Facebook page that he was trying to wash his windows and he couldn't get it done because too many neighbors stopped and talked to him out in the front of his house. So
after the mass shooting, did you see a bunch of people? Like, what was it like being a resident? You were just a block away from where it happened. What was that night and next morning? And
most people in the neighborhood, we're just literally if you could go straight from Newcomb's through the block, past the alley, you're at our house. We slept through it. We did not hear anything. It was very traumatic. There were a couple sessions so of course we went to the vigil, that was absolutely critical. I have to put in a good word for our he was the president of the neighborhood, or the business association, Carl Barbian. They just had a brand new baby, their second child. He was in the middle of all of that, when Governor DeWine came and the whole vigil, and then when Dave Chappelle got the Dayton Shine concert, he handled all of that in terms of logistics, and everybody pretty much was just in shock. I guess that's the only way I can describe it. We did have a few support therapy sessions. At that point in time, we were meeting at Wiley's for our neighborhood group, so there was a lot of room. I think I don't know how to describe it. I think we still think this couldn't have happened. We all got involved in doing the mosaic at the far corner down by the trolley stop. That was very therapeutic. A bunch of us went over to, when the Mosaic Institute was in South Park, there were different times you could volunteer, but we specifically chose a Sunday afternoon to go over and work on it as a neighborhood together. So, I just read that there was another shooting in Toledo, and so it's you can tell it's still very sad. I think of the family, the parents who lost both their daughter and their son. And actually, one of our residents knew the family fairly well, and the young man who was so disturbed, he actually had him in his Sunday school class.
Wow.
So it's, I don't want to get off onto gun control here, but it's just so traumatic, for our children and to think about it. Could go to school and get. We have, they are from Dayton originally. They have chosen to live in Lisbon, Portugal, because they don't want and they lived in our neighborhood for a while. They do not want their two little boys to risk going to school and being shot. So they've made their lives in Portugal. The mom still works here remotely. And the dad has a profession where he can kind of work anywhere, but it's something to think about. And I'm sorry to get so.
And I know just with that incident, and then, like you said, with COVID, I feel like with just those two things, a lot of the foot traffic, unfortunately, just in the business district, has been going down. And it was just announced that Hart Mercantile will be closing. I would buy at least one or two T-shirts there a year. There was, there's not too many places where you can get Dayton T-shirts or just Dayton memorabilia, especially fun ones. They were always fun, So, what do you think? Is there any revitalization that can be happening, or what are your thoughts about trying to get more people down?
Well, I guess the disadvantage of being old and having a historical perspective is, in my opinion, from the time I moved there, Fifth Street's improved immensely. And it's got a more diversity of both retail and dining and bars. I was the neighborhood president during what I call the liquor wars, and it started a very quiet man named Don White, who lived on 6th Street, went out and got a petition up to vote the neighborhood dry. And this was before my ex-husband was actually on the board at the time, and another dear friend of ours. And it made the ballot, the precinct did not get voted dry. But Paul Leonard was the mayor at the time, and so he came up with this. The city government came up with this compromise that the State Liquor Control Board, when we had 13 liquor licenses, ruled that the neighborhood was saturated, and that is a legal term in the Ohio statute, that if you have too many bars, and I think it's based on per capita and maybe geographic area, you're saturated. So the agreement was a cap on 13 liquor licenses. By then, the historic district boundaries had been defined. So I've lived with a bombing that happened where Tie 9 was, when that was Jonathan's. It was over
an actual bomb?
An actual bomb over racial discrimination. I've lived with, I won't go into all the gory details about the bars, but there were some pretty bad bars. The Blazing Stump, that one closed down. American Saloon, where I still call it the Tumbleweed, but American Saloon actually moved up to where Fifth Street Brew Pub was. So we still had some pretty rough bars. We had Southern Belle at the corner of Green and Brown, which Dr. Irvin turned into a multi-million-dollar home right by our park, and the old Fred and Sylvia. So the day I was supposed to the week I was supposed to close on, we were supposed to close on 68 Green Street, our tenant in the top floor called and said, "You may not want to close because my whole ceiling just fell in from a leaking turret." So I met the developer owner at the time, Jack Marr, and we're having this discussion, and we go up and he sees how bad it is, and he said, "Yeah, you're right, we have to fix this before you close." We close, and as we're having that conversation, there was a shooting at Fred and Sylvia's in the middle of the afternoon, gunshots.
Still didn't scare you away.
No. And so I guess I'm not sure.
I think this is just a hiccup.
I do, and there's a big debate among the business owners on the street as well, in that some people think closing the street off has helped. Some people think that it has destroyed the foot traffic, and so because you can't park close enough, we still, over the years, the city has made some effort. The business owners have made some efforts to try to get people to park by the neon in the high rise. But Dayton, we Midwesterners want to drive right to the front door of where we're gonna dine or buy something. So what they've done now is they only close the street the first Friday, or for first Friday for that weekend, and then the other weekends are open. Because most of the restaurants have stopped outdoor dining. The reason they closed it in the first place was because of COVID. They could set tables out. So I think, I guess I've seen businesses come and go. We're going to have Resonant open, the couple who owns Grist in Roost, the former Roost place. So there's always we have a new coffee shop, the Emporium, right across at Brown and Fifth Street. Originally there was an Emporium before Solar came in on the corner, a coffee shop called Emporium. So I just think there's enough our entrepreneurs, and then we've got stalwarts like Feathers. Janet Phillips has been there almost 50 years. She's featured in our our Oregon Stories. She's really seen Oregon change over the years. So I think there's enough demand. I think the renovation of the convention center has really helped, and I think with more hotels downtown, we're a very walkable city. There's hope that the former Fidelity building right on Main Street across from the convention center, that will become a boutique hotel. I see more and more what I would call business groups dining, like at Jay's. So I guess I have hope, and I don't see the downturn as staying. It's kind of weird. We always go through cycles. When the UD students leave, Memorial Day is always really a quiet weekend. It seems like maybe people are starting their summer vacations, but then it kind of picks up later. And First Fridays definitely help. That that helps with Front Street, and so I guess I'm an internal optimist.
So just back to some preservation stuff. What is, not just in the Oregon District, but just anywhere in the city, what is one of your favorite success stories maybe that you were involved in, and then talk about one of the most tragic losses that you think you've seen over the years?
Well, one favorite success story, and this is thanks to Premier Health and UT. Originally, Premier Health and UT were going to tear down the South Park Methodist Church. Jason Woodard was the developer at the time, and with support also obviously from the Rubicon Neighborhood Association right next door. That now is a very beautiful physical therapy facility, and then new physicians' offices next door. I think if I had, it's hard for me to pick one success. I just think it's the story of all of our historic neighborhoods. The city of Dayton did the original study with Richard Stock at UD, and then Code Dayton updated the study. We've got a chart on our website that shows how property values in all the historic districts have improved since 1996 through 2022. So that doesn't mean that people get priced out of their homes. I think everybody's very concerned about property values going up. That's just an issue overall. What it does mean is that someone like Mary Ellington, who has her house now, she's well into her 90s, her home in Wright Dunbar is an asset for her that will pass on generational wealth. And so to me, it's kind of I guess what I would call addressing some of the systemic issues of redlining and disinvested neighborhoods that never had the investment, or if they did, the property values just haven't been able to keep up to attract new owners and additional home maintenance. So the single most tragic story, of course, is the Traxler Mansion. That home was unique not only to Dayton, but the Chateauesque style is very unique to Ohio. The architect was the founder of the Miami University architectural program. The family, the Traxler family, were a very well-known family here, business owners here. It's just tragic that lot was lost. And one of the policy and advocacy priorities Preservation Dayton has is to try to get the city of Dayton to implement a vacant property registration program. Many other Ohio cities have this program so that people have an incentive to either fix their vacant properties up and put them back into use before they get so far gone that they become magnets for crime and arson, or at least put them up for sale to someone who will renovate the property. To the city's credit, we have implemented, the city has implemented a civil penalties ordinance, which now means the city can issue liens, fines against LLC owners, limited liability owners. Before that, the city had no power to enforce an LLC to maintain and keep their property up to the housing code requirements. So the city tells us that's a first step to get that system in place, all the training in place. They did that last July, and they're utilizing it. So we'll probably be knocking on the city's door again to see if we're ready to do the vacant property ordinance.
Yeah, that would be great for us.
Yeah.
We just have so many negligent property owners, out-of-state property owners that are just doing nothing with these homes, just letting them sit, and when there's people out there that would gladly rehab them.
Yeah,
and the Traxler is just a block or so from where we are right now. And I just remember seeing the fire trucks and everything from my upstairs window, and that was just a terrible day.
One of the things we were able to do before it burned the second time, we were able to get Preservation Dayton funded a LiDAR scan, and then an architectural firm here in town. And this is terrible that I'm having a senior moment and can't give them credit, but we do on the website. They actually did plans so that if somebody wanted to come and rebuild the house, we've got all the dimensions, all the massing, all the footprint. The good thing about this being in a historic District 2 protected zoning area is whatever goes on that lot will have to be fit with the architectural character and mass to some degree of the original property. The land bank owns the land now, so it is sitting there waiting for development from somebody who wants to come along, and we're happy to share the LiDAR scan and plans. And you can see that on our website if you go to our endangered properties site.
So where do you see Preservation Dayton going over the next few years? Like, where would you love to see it in 10 years, or just kind of even offshoots of it and just evolving? Where do you see that organization? What are your hopes and dreams?
Well, you've heard me joke before that before I die, I want Preservation Dayton to be like the Cleveland Restoration Society, which is one of the most renowned and well-resourced and most effective nonprofit historic preservation groups in the country. Or Cincinnati Preservation Association as well, or Columbus Landmarks, where we have enough resources to have a full-time staff member so that we're not all spending 50 hours a week on preservation policies.
We're all volunteers.
Everybody's a volunteer. One of the things, one would hope, Mike Parks wrote in the Dayton Daily News about as us aging boomers are passing away, this is going to be the biggest transition of individual wealth that our country has ever seen. And so one of our goals, I hope, is to try to get a planned giving program put together. I have to put in a thank you to my dear friends and neighbors, Jim and Marianne Pryor. When Jim passed, he made Preservation Dayton a beneficiary of their estate. And so far we have $250,000, which we have earmarked for a project that you have been working on, including tearing out plaster and groundhog poop and HVAC and plumbing. Preservation Dayton, about 4 years ago, we formed a community development corporation with the sole purpose of starting a revolving fund that would renovate vacant historic homes, sell them at market rate along with fundraising so that we could go and take the proceeds back into the revolving fund and do another one. And so we bought our first property over in the Paul Lawrence Dunbar Historic District, just 3 houses down from the Dunbar House. A year ago, last July 16th, we closed on it. And because of volunteers like you and because of very, very generous benefactors like the Pryors, we pretty much think we have enough money to bring that home. It's an 1883 home. The Wright family rented a home on the same block while they were building their home over on Hawthorne Street in Wright Dunbar. It's been vacant at least for 20 years. Some of the family who's lived on the street forever, second, third generation, think it was vacant more than that back in even before 1960. But we've pretty much got the structural work done. We're winding that up. We're getting a new roof on it. Again, you and countless volunteers have really helped with the demo and many of the kind of the basic repairs. So next is the siding. Our goal is to get the exterior up to code by the time winter hits this fall. So we've gotten several grants. We've got, there's a national group called the 1772 Foundation, which does nothing but fund revolving funds for historic rehabilitation programs. We were able to get a $10,000 matching grant to do a feasibility study with them last year, and then we got our first capital grant for $50,000. We got an Ohio History Fund grant for $20,000. We're just wrapping up the details of that contract. That's for to go toward HVAC and plumbing work. We got a $5,000 Greenlight grant from the Dayton Foundation. And we got a $10,000 grant from the Dayton Book Fair Foundation. Many of you know Rabbit Hole Books. There we have to provide 60 hours of volunteer work toward Rabbit Hole Books and the big book sale. So we've done some grant funding and need to do a little bit more. I've got my long list of other grants to apply for. So we're looking for volunteer grant writers too. So hopefully, I guess what I've seen with the Oregon District, and we've all seen it, you know, name any one of the neighborhood groups. Once you can take an abandoned property on a block and renovate it, that inspires faith in the neighborhood, faith in the market. And current homeowners, you know, so many homeowners are surrounded by blight. They go, well, my property values are nil. If I leave this to my family or I try to sell it, it's not worth it for me to move. But I'm not going to put in, whatever, a whole new, fix the siding in the back, because I'm not going to get any money out of my investment. But by fixing one property, and that's how Oregon started. It was few people who said, well, the Pattersons, I'm going to fix up the Balsley mansion, the Hinkles. Well, the Hinkles, when they brought their house at the corner of Jackson and Hess, there was a car repair shop on the side. It's a Federal-style 2-story brick house, and Joanne and Bill tell the story where the first night they were there, they're out on their second floor porch looking down, and the gravel is all shining from the car repair lot next door, the outbuilding, in the moonlight. And Bill Hinkle says, Joanne, these are our Oregon diamonds. So being able to see those diamonds, in the rough, and I guess that's what makes us preservationists also crazy, because it's a love of renovation, and your home here is so beautiful. You have to love it. And
yeah, even for me, I've always been a fan of the underdog. You know, like whenever there's a sports, that team has won 5 years in a row. Who's the other? I want the other guy to win,
Right.
And that's why I really like Dayton. I feel like we've always, at least maybe not always, but in the past 50 or so years, we've kind of declined to become the other guy.
Yeah.
And so just kind of seeing the other guy being able to kind of really be revitalized and just.
Yeah.
And the thing that I like too is I like being like a bigger fish in a smaller pond. Because, like you were saying about Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati, those are all paid positions, and we are just kind of grassroots volunteers. I feel like we do more with less is kind of how I like, and so that's what has always been inspiring to me, is kind of doing more with less. What would you like? Anything else that you'd like to mention that we haven't talked about today, or anything?
No, I think we've hit on everything. I mean, I know this has longevity, but again, thanks to you and so many other young leaders and experienced leaders on our board, we've got a whole rest of the summer, fall, into the first of the year, when we always hold our annual member meeting in late January. But the downtown walking tours, which was your idea, Evan. We of course have our neighborhood self-guided tours that you can do either by printing out the script or listening on your phone. That was your idea. And again, we should mention that some of these things that we're doing were funded by City of Dayton mini grants. We always have to give the city credit. But just be sure that you follow us on Facebook. Be sure we now have a master calendar on our homepage for all upcoming events.
And on TikTok now.
And TikTok, yes, yes, absolutely, on TikTok to reach a younger and a different audience. So I would just encourage everybody, learn more about Dayton. Go on one of the Friday night walking tours. They're every Friday through October 9th. And they're $10 a piece. And then we will be spotlighting, we did one already here in Dayton View. We will be spotlighting, we'll do some guided tours of the historic neighborhoods as well. We do a bunch of sneak peeks. We just did the Commodore. If you want inspiration, go to our website under the About section. There's the Excellence in Preservation Awards. So you'll see some of the other leaders in other historic neighborhoods. I have to put a plug in for Kyle Wilkinson and Jana Fornio. You can read about them. They're a military family. They won the Oregon Award, I think, about 2 years ago, and they've renovated 4 properties in our neighborhood, and I always say they put our housing committee out of business. Although we're reinstituting our housing committee, we've got some weeds and some minor things we want to take care of. But Dayton's historic neighborhoods are great places to live. You can be as private as you want, or you can have an instant set of friends and social life. It's really up to you. And we're all very chauvinistic, somebody who lives in Dayton View versus somebody who lives in McPherson Town thinks we live in the best historic neighborhood of the city.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you again
All right.
for this conversation.
You're welcome. It was fun.
Appreciate it.
Yep, you're a natural.